Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Gretchen Jordan. I'm the Alive Association Manager. We are going to start the program in just a moment, and I will go ahead and get the slideshow going. And you should be able to see my screen, except I want to use the slideshow. There we go. And I know you can see my screen now. And we'll have, we had about 25 people register for this call today, which is a fantastic group. So I'll just give you a little bit of housekeeping really quick. You're all automatically muted at this point, although we will be opening up the mics for discussion throughout the presentation. So if you don't have a microphone, that's okay. On your GoToWebinar control panel, you will also see a question and a chat box. And during Emily's presentation, I will be monitoring the chat box and give that back to Emily, as well as, if you have any other questions, we'll be just watching those. So otherwise, you're welcome to just take some notes. Emily will be handing out a copy of this slideshow. Afterwards, you'll get that in a follow-up email. And we're really glad that you're here. So we'll jump right into the first slide and just do a quick thank you to Verified Volunteers as a sponsor this year for a grant to be able to allow us to explore and expand our GoToWebinar services for our membership. So thank you to them. And I would like to introduce Emily Brahman-Bauer for the presentation today. And you read her bio, but I will say that Emily, I've known for, it's been over 10 years. She's been an excellent advocate, and as you know, she also wrote the chapter on advocacy in the CCBA handbook, textbook, and she gives a wonderful presentation, and we really want to make this interactive today. So please, if you want to practice using the chat box to say hi to everybody, feel free. We do have a couple of poll questions and that we'll kick right off here as soon as we go into the next slide and talk about the agenda. But first, let's do just a couple of quick polls for you to answer. And you'll see them pop up on the screen here in just a moment. And just go ahead and click on that little button. And I can tell how many of you have voted today so we know. Just click on yes or no. The question is, we have planned to have this call go to 11:30 Pacific or 2:30 Eastern for discussion time. And let us know if this works for you. Otherwise, we'll make a quick adjustment to the agenda today. So please go ahead and answer that poll quickly. Just click yes or no. All right, so most of the folks have voted. We'll close that poll, we'll share the results, and most everybody can, so that's great. So we will just go on with the next slide. The next poll, and just to learn a little bit more about where you are calling from, we'll go ahead and launch that next one. Just click quickly what time zone you're calling from. That kind of gives us a little bit of an idea of where folks are calling from. So go ahead and click your buttons. All right, we've got a few coming in. Terrific. I will close the poll and show you those results. So we've got, we need some representation in the Mountain Time Zone, and it looks like more people have yet to arrive, and I think that there were a few. And then one more poll question, just to, again, learn a little bit more about who is here. What type of organization do you work with? A nonprofit, government, corporate, or other? Fantastic. Oh, and almost everybody has voted. Excellent. So I'll go ahead and share those results so you can see. And that is pretty indicative of our profession, I think, as well. So that's good. We've got a nice cross-section of that. So I'll hide the results. I will be advancing the slides, monitoring the questions and the chat box. So just looking at that, and I will go ahead and mute myself. And Emily, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you, Gretchen. First of all, I'd just like to know everybody can hear me. I'm assuming you can hear me, Gretchen, but you can also put a little bit of a yes, I can hear you in the chat box. That would be helpful. If just one or two of you would say that, then I would know that I'm being heard by everybody. So my name's Emily, and I am really pleased to present this particular webinar again. I've done this a couple of years in a row, and it's always based loosely on the chapter that I wrote for the CCVA textbook. By loosely, I mean that each year I modify it a little bit in order to be able to really reflect what's going on. So this year we are, looking at primarily why we advocate. What is advocacy? You can see here. Less on how to be an advocate, because I think that a lot of you already are doing advocacy, and then doing more about advocating for the profession. And really the difference in this webinar as we go forward is that we've extended it to an hour and a half in order to be able to incorporate more discussion, more feedback from you, more exchange of ideas of what are your challenges, what works for you in advocacy, for yourself, for your profession, and what doesn't work, so that we can grow this topic really. So you see this is our workshop agenda. We're going to start with why advocate. So I'm going to have to tell Gretchen every once in a while to advance the slides. Advance the slide, please. Thank you. So I want to start with why is advocacy important? We know the basic. If you've gotten your CVA, you know that this is an important competency that all volunteer managers should have. But why? Why is advocacy important? Well, we can start off by saying that effective management and leadership of volunteer engagement builds organizational capacity. We know that. It builds the capacity of an organization to reach their goals, mission, and vision. It's not only that, it builds the capacity of causes, of social movements, of any kind of organization to really advance and grow. My personal thing is that effective management and leadership of volunteer engagement is bottom line transformative for organizations, for clients, consumers, communities, causes, and volunteers. Really, volunteerism is essential, but it goes much farther when it is effectively led or managed. But there are challenges, we all know that, and this is where the advocacy piece comes in. So let's talk about them on the next slide. Gretchen. Thank you. So why is advocacy important again? What are the challenges? And this is where we're going to open this up to hear a little bit from you. What other challenges than the ones that I've listed here have you experienced in advocating for volunteer engagement professionals, for yourself, for your program, for the profession? By the way, I just want to say that before we get some feedback here, that the ones that I've listed here are both my experience and experience of my colleagues and from people that I've spoken to and interviewed.
We'll have some tips for you to implement yourself personally, but a lot of this is really more about teamwork and about working up the chain of command within your organization. Okay, here are a few of the questions that have come in. What's the best starting point for
Gretchen?
And what tools are helpful.
Okay, Emily, it looks like there was some feedback on the audio for folks. So if folks would like to say something, go ahead and there's a button that you can also push to raise your hand. But we are getting some comments in the question box, and that's from Jerry in New York. And he says, difficulty with briefly explaining the work a VRM does. Oh, I need to unmute Emily.
Okay,
Emily,
now
I'm sorry. Now you're, I had unmuted you, I muted you by mistake. We had some feedback for the attendees when I was trying to unmute everybody.
I see.
So let's just go directly with the questions in case that. So Jerry put something in the chat box, in the question box, that says he's had difficulty with briefly explaining the work a VRM does. Is there anybody else that would like to put something in the question or the chat box of challenges that they've had?
While you're doing that, I want to talk a little bit about where else I sort of glean these challenges, because I think it's really, really important, and it comes into play later on. So MAVA, the Minnesota Association of Volunteer Administration, did a study in 2017 that is called Promoting Job Equity Initiative. And out of that study came a report. And one of the important things about the report is that some of the things that you see on this slide came up as results. Really what the study was, briefly, if you're not familiar with it, I urge you to become familiar with it. The study was of 464 CEOs, did a survey, and there were follow-up interviews with 24 of those CEOs. And it was comparing development directors, volunteer engagement professionals, program directors, and human resource directors in things like salary, in requirements, in what their challenges are, and how integrated and powerful and involved they are at executive leadership and strategic planning within their organizations. And the results you see here on this screen, that other staff don't see the value of volunteers, and there's a lack of understanding of volunteer management, which may in fact go to what Jerry, you were saying about how to explain the work of a volunteer engagement professional in a way that is succinct and grabs people. Low salaries, multiple job functions, a lack of a career progression, which lead to high turnover in the roles. And here, very important pieces about advocacy is that volunteer engagement professionals are not on the executive leadership team very often, and they are often not included in strategic planning. So those are some of them. What else do we have questions?
We had a great one from Melissa,
Mm-hmm.
and her challenge has been staff wanting last-minute support when you could have been at the table for months helping to plan.
There you go, that idea of not being part of that strategic planning. Okay, that's a definite challenge. So what does that have to do with advocacy? Well, out of this report, I'm just going to pull a couple of quotes. And again, this is from CEOs. One of the quotes that you would see if you read the executive summary of this report, and I will give you the reference for this later so that you can all go and get this report and read it yourself. It's very, very important. But one of the quotes is, if volunteer engagement professionals would advocate to be placed on the executive leadership team, it could make a difference. Another quote, again, this is coming from these interviews and the survey of CEOs of organizations. And by the way, the organizations are both governmental and nonprofit, big and small. But another quote is, if volunteer engagement professionals would advocate for higher salaries and have a more professional image, it could make a difference in salary level. And this, of course, is after the survey found that volunteer engagement professionals are, even though their requirements and qualifications to get the job are the same as those other 3 positions, are almost always paid less.
Emily, I have another comment and question from Rebecca in Texas. Rebecca says, staff hearing you but not listening. Is this a result of them not taking us seriously? And I just had the hair stand up in the back of my neck because this is the one that really gets me.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And one of the, I think that's a really important point, Rebecca, and it is something that we talk about a little bit later. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that one of the issues is that if staff don't understand the value of volunteers, if they don't understand the importance of volunteerism for their overall organization, if it's not part of the culture of the organization, then they are not going to respect or take the work that you do as a volunteer manager seriously. That is definitely one of the things that we talk about when we talk about how to be an effective advocate, is how do you get your point across where people do take you seriously and they respect you. And that's where it starts. It starts with respecting oneself and then projecting that so that others respect you so that they do listen to you and take you seriously. Any other challenges?
I'm not seeing anything else come in. Oh, wait, there is another one from Jerry. Another challenge is the VRM VEP answers to a supervisor who is low on the organizational chart and might not even be at the table.
That's interesting. And again, I really refer you guys to this, to the MAVA study, which again, I'll direct you there later on at the very end. But that's interesting that you say that, Jerry. One of the things that I saw within the study is that even when your supervisor is at the table, it's filtering your needs and your needs as a professional and your needs for your program up to that strategic table talk at that executive level. If your supervisor is low on the organizational chart, that means that your role is being filtered that many times before it gets to the executive leadership team. Does that make sense? So again, that's really why we went directly. I was part of that study. Why we went directly to CEOs to talk to them about how they structure their executive leadership team and how they feel about the role of volunteerism and volunteer managers within their organization, because it's about getting to that executive leadership team. So we can always take some more of these questions and come back. These challenges, we're going to talk about those later on as well, but and maybe even have somewhat of a discussion if we can figure out the background sound issue. Let's move on and talk about advocacy in general for the volunteer manager. Now, we're not going to talk about all of these aspects today because it's such a big thing that we really want to talk about advocacy for yourself as a volunteer manager and advocacy for the profession. But it's important to understand that a volunteer manager, in your role, you're advocating on the behalf of a lot of different causes, ideas, things. volunteerism, you're advocating for individual volunteers, for your program, for your position. Sometimes you're advocating for the organization, for your partners and the community, and of course for the profession. The important thing here, and I think this goes back to one of the things that I think it was Rebecca that you had mentioned, and that is that how you are an advocate for any of these things, for an individual, for your volunteer program, for the profession, it's all interrelated, because your advocacy, your successful advocacy, builds your credibility and your legitimacy in your role and for the profession. So as you become a better advocate, for your individuals, for volunteers, for your volunteer program, to have a seat at the table, you are in fact advocating and helping support the profession, yourself as a volunteer manager. It's all interrelated because it builds credibility. At any time, please go ahead. If you have a question on any of this, please let me know. Okay, I'm going to move on. We're going to talk real quickly about what is advocacy and how we're using the term here. Advocacy is deliberate. It's a process. It has steps. It's done on behalf of an individual or group or cause. That might be yourself or it might be the profession. And the objective is a change in the way people think. It might be a change in policy or practices. It can be a proposed change or it could be current. But the objective is that you're trying to change the way people think and act through your advocacy. The most important thing to take away from advocacy is that it is intentional. A lot of times we are reactive. I think somebody had just said one of their challenges is that they're asked for things that they have to do in a moment that they could have been planning for the last months if they had been included in the original planning. Advocacy is intentional. It is not reactive. And we react all the time as volunteer managers, but that's not advocacy. Advocacy is intentional. So this is a good time, Gretchen, to take a poll.
Okay, and I do have another comment. If you wanted to do that now and discuss, or after the poll.
Sure, go ahead with the comment and then we'll do the poll.
Okay, this is from Becca. Thank you, Becca. It would be great to discuss advocacy to external partners and stakeholders, i.e. major corporations wanting to volunteer but not respecting the structure and capacity of our program.
Ah, okay. Good. Hopefully at the end of this, we will be able to have a more open conversation talking about different aspects of advocacy, and we can come back to this because that's a really good discussion about what is the best way to advocate to our external partners.
All right, we'll go ahead and do the poll now. Emily, is that okay?
Please.
Okay, one more poll. And you should see that come up in just a moment. And the poll says, I'm confident in my skills to advocate for myself, volunteers, or program, and you could pick any of these. Every single time, I have to work at it, but eventually get a positive result. Coworkers don't seem to get what I'm saying. Ugh, I don't feel like I have a voice at all. And others are more eloquent, persistent, or successful. And everybody is chiming in, which is great. And we do have some responses to each one, which is terrific. I'm really glad to see that. Oh, good. All right. Almost a few more folks to plug in their poll questions they like. I'm going to keep this open for just a few more seconds, and then we'll share the results. And some of this kind of covers a little bit of the discussion already, I think. I'll go ahead and close the poll, and I'll share those results. And Emily, if you want to discuss those real quick.
Waiting for the results. So while I'm waiting for the results to pop up, oh, there they are.
Okay, good. There is
Oh,
a little bit of a delay.
Great, that's great. So it looks like 73% of you are, you have an idea of how to advocate, and eventually you get a positive result. So that's really cool, because what that means is that we're going to spend less time on the how of advocacy and more time finding out how you get those positive results. I'm not sure how we're going to do that. If we might be a lot of writing in the chat box if we can't resolve the background sound issue. But let's move on to a real quick, the how of advocacy. Which is the next slide. So while Gretchen is lining up that next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this particular part of the, there it is, no, and the slide after that, this particular part of this webinar. Next slide, please. Advocacy is deliberate. I'm thinking Gretchen might have some technical difficulties there. There it is. Advocacy is deliberate. Again, the important thing about advocacy is it's intentional. You're thinking about it, you're planning it, you're gathering information, you have an idea of how you want to do it, you reiterate it, and you monitor it, and eventually, like 73% of you said, you get there with a successful result. This particular model is the model that is explained in the chapter in the CCBA textbook. It's called Prepare, Plan, Implement, and Evaluate. And again, if there's nothing that you get out of this particular idea, is that this is an ongoing process that is intentional and deliberate. So real quick, we're going to run through the next 4 slides fairly quickly, although I do want to pause every once in a while to get any kind of feedback from people. So if you, well, first of all, I'm going to ask how many of you are familiar with this particular model. Later on, I'm going to want to know if you have any other models of advocacy that you use. But how many of you use a model similar to PI? Prepare, plan, implement, and evaluate. Just go ahead and, you know, this would have been a good poll, but just go ahead and let us know how many of you use this model or a variation of this model. And while we're doing this, I just want to say a few words about what we're talking about here. So the most important thing about preparation and planning is, in the preparation, it's the research. Obviously, you need to know about your audience, who you're advocating to. You need to know about the context, the history, you know, people's values. This is going to come in when you start figuring out your strategies for communication, things like that. But even more important in preparation is gathering your allies and collaborating with your allies. It might be a coworker who is an ally. It might be another group. It depends on what you're advocating for. But the best way to advocate is not to do it alone, is to collaborate with your allies. Identify who they are, that's part of the research. Connect with them, that's your preparation. I go into a lot of discussion about what is the difference between strategies and tactics. But again, most of you seem to have had this experience and knowing the difference between the strategy as a general framework and plan and tactics, which are the exact means by which your strategy is carried out. Before we sort of go on, I don't know if you want to open it up for discussion here, Gretchen, or if we want to take anything in the chat about anybody's experience, again, with this model and with using preparation and planning and identifying who your partners, research, your set strategies are.
Yeah, I've got some comments back. Jerry says he's worked with something similar. Melissa says, not as familiar with the model, but familiar with the process. Michelle is familiar with it. Jerry says he likes to call them champions rather than partners.
Right.
The same process. And then Angela says it depends on the situation. I keep talking about the good / outcomes volunteers have, what gets done because of them, etc., but not a full setup plan. I work with those staff first who get engaging volunteers. And I would also say about this plan is, my experience, when you look at this, you think, oh my gosh, I have to do this full-blown process. But it could, with practice, this becomes something that is much easier, and it could be just a lot simpler depending on what you're trying to advocate for. I mean, if it's just as simple as getting a coat rack in the volunteer staging room, that could be a really simple process. But being able to be at quote unquote at the table of planning those big long range events, that's going to be more involved, but it's the same process. So it's kind of a little bit like riding a bike or driving a car. The process is the same, but you may be just going around the block, or you may be taking a cross country trip.
Right. No, that is a really good point. I'm going to move on to the next part of the next slide on this particular model, which is the implementing and evaluation. And again, I like the poll, the way that you worded the poll, Gretchen, because the idea that 73% of you felt that, you got it down, you have to work at it, but eventually you get the results you're looking for, which is really what that the evaluation or the monitoring under implementation is all about. It's about looking at those tactics and strategies, and what did you do? How do you have to tweak it to make it more effective? Modifying it, and then just keep going with the advocacy, and really, at the end, you're successful. What I'd like to know is how have you, Jerry, your champions, for example, how have you acknowledged and celebrated with your champions when you have been successful at advocacy? Jerry, for example, but because you call them champions, so obviously you're working with them, but anybody else? What are some of the ways that you have incorporated your allies, your champions, into this whole process, including the acknowledgement at the end? Are we having any?
Yeah. Jerry says he invites them to volunteer recognition events. Melissa says she acknowledges them publicly during employee town halls, recognize in a monthly e-newsletter, send a personal handwritten note. Handwritten is in all caps.
Nice. That makes it personal. Anything else? Those are great. Maybe we could think of some other ways to do that. I'm just thinking one of the great things
Michelle has one too. She says an easy one, and it's perhaps obvious, is just sharing the results with them.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. I hear somebody in the background. Maybe that's another one. Another way of doing this, and this goes back to the previous slide when we talked about collaboration and the importance of partners, is to be there as an ally or champion for your partners when they need an ally or champion, so that it really is a collaboration, and letting your partners and your allies know, and your champions know that you're there for them as well. And that's a great way of sort of building networks, of really building advocacy, when you're able to sort of reciprocate the support that you've gotten from them by giving it to them. So, anything else on this? Very doing good. We can move on. It sounds like people are pretty proficient in this area of advocacy, and that's great. But let's talk real quickly about what makes an effective advocate.
Emily, I do have a couple of last-minute comments to put in here. Jerry says that partnerships, he feels that partnerships need to focus on both parties' benefits.
Right.
And then Melissa says pictures of staff with your volunteers.
Oh, that's great. Especially
that
those.
Visual is so impactful.
Right, right. And that's a great idea, because it has it really goes to some of the things that we're going to be talking about in terms of effective advocacy, in terms of communication, and really it's about building relationships there. When you're showing the staff who are your allies, your partners, your champions, along with the volunteers, that communicates so much to everybody else. Yeah, visuals advocate for you 24/7 and build relationships. Exactly. Thank you. So again, what are the skills that we have? What are our competencies that we need to have in order to be effective advocates? I'm speaking to the choir. 73% plus 20-something% are already there. It's about being knowledgeable about the issue and the context, and also about your audience, both who you are advocating on whose behalf, but also who you're advocating to. And it's about, and I'm going to come back to this conviction piece, but let's go back to the next slide. It's about being skilled in research. That's the next slide. And it's also about being a good communicator. I think Gretchen is, Gretchen, are you there? There we go. Okay. It's about being skilled in research, in learning about the issues, about networking and knowing who's who. It really is about critical thinking. You really have to look at the whole picture very holistically, looking at it from different systems, ways of looking at things. You really have to be a good critical thinker, so that you're not only researching, but you are able to see your audience's perspective as well as your own, and how to, go back and forth with that. And yes, you have to be a good communicator, both active listening and being able to persuade people. That goes back to what you said, Jerry, at the very beginning, about how to briefly explain in a way that captures people what the work is of the volunteer engagement professional. One example, for example, is more and more we're learning how storytelling and being able to tell your story, or the profession story, or your program story in a succinct but persuasive way is so very important to being a good advocate. I want to go back. You don't have to go back to the other slide, but I want to go back to that second piece about that I had before, about conviction, about having conviction. A lot of the research and just personal experience, interviews with people have shown that having your own strong conviction about what you do and who you are as a professional is really fundamental. If you don't feel strongly about your role, the importance of volunteerism, the importance of volunteer management, that volunteer management is a profession, your equivocation about this issue will come through in your advocacy. So it really starts with you. You really have to feel strong and have your own philosophy about volunteer management, about volunteerism, and about the important role it plays in your organization. So are there any comments on this?
Not so far, Emily. Oh, wait. No, not yet.
Okay, cool. At this point, I am looking for the next slide, examples of advocacy that you have. You know, when you were an advocate, on whose behalf did you use a process of any kind? In other words, was it intentional? And, you know, what worked and why, or what didn't work and why? So this is where we were going to open it up. Gretchen, is there a possibility of having somebody raise their hand and then opening
yes.
them up?
Yes, folks can go ahead and raise their hand and I can unmute you individually. But if you'd like to just write something brilliant instead of say something brilliant, go ahead and put it in that question box and then we could read it out too. I do have a comment from Nikki, which would be great to start us off with. Thanks, Nikki. I think it's really important to communicate the message of advocacy in a positive way to avoid the sound of complaining about what it is. You need to help people see the vision you see.
That's great. Again, that storytelling, but that positive storytelling. Thank you very much, because I hadn't thought about that, but that really is extremely important to keep it positive.
I don't see anybody that has raised their hand yet. Oh, Angela has. All right, Angela, I'm going to unmute you. All right, you should be open.
Great. One thing I'm starting to be more intentional about is monthly I send out my volunteer newsletter to all staff now. Wasn't doing that before. So one, they're getting the volunteer newsletter every month. And as an attachment with that, I am trying to highlight one area where volunteers are and what they've been accomplishing or what they're doing, just so that the staff can see what's going on with the volunteers in different places, because we are spread over 235 acres with multiple buildings. So it's not just one building for us. We have volunteers spread out everywhere.
That's a great way of getting the word out and communicating. And it is intentional. That is something where you thought about it. You thought about what does your audience, and in this case, it's the entire staff, all staff, need to know about what you are doing. Sometimes it goes back again to what you were talking about, Jerry. How do you communicate what your job is? One way is to let people know what your volunteers are doing and how successful they are. So, great idea. Any other ideas, examples of how you're advocating for yourself and for your programs or for the profession?
I'm going to unmute Jerry. He's put a nice comment in there, and I don't know if he's got a microphone or not. It doesn't look like it. But he does say focus on the outcomes, benefits, the client's cause, etc. Another way of supporting staff and mission.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's a good one, Jerry, because it also points out that sort of research and understanding your audience piece. And I know that we all do this and we all think about it, but sometimes it's it's worth going back to is that if you're talking to an executive leadership that is very much involved in, you know, the financial aspects and the, you know, and getting grants and the sort of the numerical, quantitative results, then you want to report back and communicate with that. If you're talking to somebody who, let's say, is in your communications or public relations departments, then you really want to talk about your success stories. You want to you want to frame what you're talking about and your advocacy and your communication in a way that is going to really connect with the particular audience that you're talking to. That's a good point.
Emily, I've got a great comment from Melissa. I'm going to unmute you, Melissa, if you'd like to say that yourself. If not, I can read it out. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So what I had shared was that I read a lot in the field as to what's going on. I make sure that sometimes before I come in to jump on the computer right away that I'm taking time for myself. So I want to make sure I can relay back to leadership the trends of things that are happening with volunteers globally. Even though I'm in healthcare, there are other things that still impact us. I also try and read about whatever programs are going on in my hospital so I can see how volunteers can make an impact, but also contribute to any research opportunities. So for example, we have been a training site for service dogs. We've had puppies come on board for the last year. We now have a clinical team that are kind of making some decisions on how to incorporate these animal-assisted therapy activities into our patients' appointments. And I keep going back to, well, how can the volunteer department, you know, be included in some of the research that is being written up? So I'm constantly reading to see where else can we kind of be included to show that without any of these programs going on board, if they didn't have volunteers or the volunteer department kind of behind them, where would they be?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Is this, I'm sorry, what is this is Melissa?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Hi, Melissa. Can you elaborate a little bit more about, so you have this knowledge, you've done that research, the prepare. How do you then take that to the next step of actually making that into a program, let's say, for volunteers to be involved, in this case with the service animals? What is it? What do you do with that information that you have then? Where do you go? How do you frame it?
So I just have simply asked the question. So when I'm at the table, not on the sidelines, I'm not in the peanut gallery, but when I'm at the table, I raise just questions for the clinical team to think about. So I am sitting with nurses and doctors. And when we had a meeting a couple of months ago, and I said, yeah, but how can this be written up in terms of a research study? And one of the physicians was said, you know what, I was just thinking that, you know, so there's an opportunity to not only contribute, but hopefully maybe have the ability to write that piece as to how volunteers, you know, are being a part of it. So it's just because I kind of wedge myself in and I just simply raise those questions.
So you're at the table already.
Yes, but it's not always that way. Yep.
And when it's not always that way, you use the words wedge, okay? So I'm just going to use it too. How, if you aren't, if on those situations where you're not at the table and you can't raise those questions, by the way, that's a great way of bringing in your advocacy and starting your advocacy is by raising questions to the people that you're advocating to. How would you wedge your way in with that knowledge that you've attained about the possibilities, about this advocacy issue? How would you wedge your way into being able to raise those questions and get the conversation started?
So it's completely strategic. I usually will schedule one-on-ones with some of the heavy hitters or leaders of that, and I just ask for 15 minutes of their time and I make my pitch.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's a great, we can come back to that. That's really a great strategy and tactic.
Okay, Emily, thanks. Melissa, I'm going to mute you back again, and I have got a great comment from Jerry. And Jerry, I'm going to try again, send you a mute request. If you do have a microphone, otherwise I'll go ahead and read the question. And no, okay. So Jerry says, regarding advocating for the profession, get involved with professional associations and take responsibility for your own professional development, even when a company won't pay for it if you can financially swing it. Thanks, Jerry.
If anybody else has a comment on that, thank you, Jerry. If anybody else has a comment on this, I would love to hear your perspective. One of the things that we will be discussing later has to do with that, has to do with how we take responsibility for our own professional development and what other national and local associations for volunteer managers can do to support that, especially when your company won't pay for it. I know that over my career, which is over 30 years, at the very beginning, throughout my career, I paid for my own conferences. I paid out of pocket for my dues for Dovias. It goes back to what I was saying about conviction and philosophy. You have to feel strongly enough that you are willing to pay for this to develop yourself as a professional in order to be a good advocate for the profession. Anybody else have that experience?
Oh, this is Gretchen. I definitely have, and it's been a combination. When I could get my organization to pay for it, it's always a win. But certainly there's been organizations that I've worked for where, there just was not the money, and that was kind of the norm. Everybody paid for their own if they wanted to do that. But at least you could get paid time off. And other organizations, it's been, yep, absolutely, here's the money, here's the paid time off, So we all want to get to that point. I think it's really important. We have another great comment from Nikki. Nikki, I'm going to go to you and unmute you if you'd like to say that. Otherwise, let's see, you should be live. Nikki, go ahead. And I don't hear you. So I will go ahead and read what she has written. Been fortunate enough to have a lot of support in my organization, and I've been able to create more volunteer positions. I've been working to create more leadership roles for volunteers. Mm-hmm. This helps people in my organization to see volunteers in a new way. Many volunteers have professional skills that are on par with board members and other leaders in the organization. Volunteers, they're just not for mailings anymore. So right.
That's a great point, Nikki. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is one of the things that in the chapter and in other places, and actually there are webinars out this and some resources on this about how to develop your volunteers as leaders. And that's really, really important. Part of this is walking the talk. Part of this is by saying that you want your staff and your organization, your CEOs, to really value and respect volunteers. You also need to do that by developing them as leaders. Or what I have used the word empowering them, but of course I don't use that word because I can't say that word, but empower your volunteers to be leaders. And that actually then has, again, that communication effect of showing the staff how important volunteers and volunteerism is, and therefore how important your role is in the organization. So that's a great idea. Something that definitely we should all be thinking about is developing our volunteers as leaders of what they do, empowering them. Anything else? If not, let's move on, because Jerry's, especially Jerry's comment about professional development works right into this next section, which is really what we're going to talk about for the rest of this until we get to the last part on just open discussion. But this is about advocating for the profession and what we can do, again, in a very intentional way to advocate for the profession. So first of all, we want to prepare. Again, what is our goal? What do we want to change? Why? Who our stakeholders are, partners, allies, audience, and what we need to do in terms of research about the field, and our conviction that this is in fact a profession. Really, again, finding out what resources are out there, both practical resources, but also academic. There is so much more happening in the academic arena, especially about pracademics, if anyone has heard that word, and that is practical research, or research that is applied and can be applied practically in a practical way to what we do, to the profession. And it's also about communication and what the myths are out there. And we all know what those myths are, and how we can communicate against and against those myths and show that they are not true. So we prepare, and I think that let's move on to plan. This next slide, there you go. And here we are, strategies. This is where you start talking about strategies for the, let's see. Okay, we missed one, strategies for the individual. Can you go back one? Because this is talking, there you go. This is exactly what you were talking about, Jerry. So your plan, what are you going to do as an individual? It starts with professional development. And I really want to mention that we have two things here. Professional development includes what Melissa said she did, and that is before she comes in every day to work, she does some research about not just about volunteerism, but about that too, and volunteer management, but about the field or the industry that she's working in, so that she is knowledgeable about not just who she is and what her role is, but also about how it fits into sort of that greater context, in this case, the hospital where she works, or healthcare. Then, Jerry also mentioned joining professional association groups, going to conferences, going to workshops. This is a really important one, and somebody alluded to this earlier, and that is about going public whenever possible, going public within your organization, but also externally within your community, where you're thanking your champions and allies, where you are taking photographs and sending out photographs and newsletters of staff who are your allies and volunteers, really going public about what you do, what your volunteers do, what your successes are. Again, like Nikki said, in a positive way. We talked about communication with decision makers and people with power. And I think this is really an important one, and that is reshaping the position image so that you're seen as a strategic leader. You're walking the talk. And by the way, this also comes from the MAVA study, that this is one of the things that CEOs sort of talked about, and that is that they would have that respect and they would listen more to the volunteer engagement professionals if they appear to be more professional. They appear to be more strategic leaders, and I think that's really important. Again, walk the talk. Any comments on
Emily? Yeah, we do have a comment from Nikki, but also a discussion question from Karen. But I'll skip ahead and bring what Nikki said. She does not have a microphone, so I will read it. Thank you, Nikki. She says, I also give volunteers opportunities to learn new skills. Our public libraries have online tutorials that teach people about new skills in computer programs. This helps volunteers reach new levels and do more to help the organization. Consequently, staff members begin to see that there are a few jobs that are beyond the volunteers' reach.
That's great. That's a great idea. One of the things that goes along with that, Nikki, also is helping your volunteers learn how to, depending on your volunteers' needs, learn how to incorporate their volunteerism and what they're doing with you, their leadership skills, their new leadership skills, and in this case, what you're talking about, their new skills and knowledge, and incorporate that into their resume or into the rest of their life. It really is transformative for the volunteers when you can show that what they're doing helps them grow, but at the same time, it's, again, by communicating that to your staff, you're also sending a message to your staff about, again, walking the talk, how you're helping your volunteers become leaders because you are a leader. So, great suggestions, Nikki. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. And we have a comment from Karen as a possibility to discuss for this advocacy discussion. She says, we have many long-term volunteers and our organization is experiencing a lot of growth. I would like to discuss easing volunteers into change and making them feel like a part of the process.
Okay. That's interesting. Karen, is that is a great topic. Can we sort of pull that to a little bit later? Because I think that is definitely relevant. And we will have time in the end, in this last half hour, to talk about that. Is that okay? Because again, that is definitely part of advocacy, and that is using your volunteers as your champions, as your allies, as you are sort of advocating for your program in this case, and advocating for your role, is using your volunteers and easing them into that change and having them be part of the process.
Karen says yes. I think that's a great real-life example of how to apply these topics. Do you want me to go to the next slide then?
Please.
Okay.
So again, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, because I'd love to hear your ideas, or we can talk about it now, and that is, how does the profession itself advocate for the profession? What is our plan? So real quick, we advocate as a united voice. I think that's one of the goals of Alive, and that's what we're working on with these kinds of webinars in the Alive Academy, but also in other things that we do. We're going to talk about that later, or what we could do. We'll talk about that as well. Professional organizations collaborate at all levels. So one of the things that we can talk about later is also something called the Alliance. And this grew out of a national summit that occurred at the 2017 MAVA conference in St. Paul in 2017. And this is, the Alliance is, and Alive is part of that, representing volunteer managers. But this is an alliance of organizations and people who are talking about the importance, the strategic importance of volunteer engagement, of volunteerism in community and societal and government change, and how important that is. Many countries already have something like this. The United States really doesn't, but we're starting a national alliance around us collaborating at a very national level about volunteerism. And volunteer management, of course, is really important there. I mentioned academics before to support the legitimacy of volunteer management as a profession. The MAVA study itself is an example of academics, where this was a very academic, if you will, study that was done that has very practical results and practical usage. Advocating for the recognition of profession, again, that is some of the things that we do in Alive, and professionals support each other, especially new professionals, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well when we talk about some of the new things that we're doing with Alive. Anybody else have any ideas, other ideas for how, as professionals, we advocate for the profession?
Emily, we've got a great comment from Jerry talking about being a strategic leader. He says he always has a brief agenda going into a meeting with staff or volunteers. Shows I'm prepared, don't want to waste their time, and have time at the end to discuss items they bring up in order to stay on the initial message.
Wow, that's great. And again, walking that talk about being a strategic leader. Thank you. We can talk about other ways as well, because that's one is to have that, is to have your ideas. In fact, again, Melissa, preparing ahead of time. These are great ideas of how you can be a strategic leader. So we're going to come back to this idea of what can local and national, and in this case, different kinds of associations do, professional associations do for advocating for the profession. We can talk about that later. Let's move on to the next slide, because language matters. How we talk about volunteer resource management matters. Now, I know that there is a big discussion, which we won't have here, about the use of volunteer, or the use of volunteer resource manager, or the actual terms. I'm not really talking about that here. I'm talking about how we think about ourselves and how we think about the profession. First of all, no matter who you are and where you're working, whether you think this is going to be your career or not, volunteer resource management is a profession. It's not a job. It is a profession because it includes all of those characteristics of any profession. It has knowledge base, it has certain competencies, it's based on experience, there's professional development, and now there's several different ways that you can be certified in volunteer management. There is scholarly and practical research and application, that pracademics things that I was telling you about. We know that volunteer resource management builds organizational capacity. That's one of those things where we have to be able to communicate that to our leaders, and that it creates opportunities for civic engagement, empowerment, volunteer transformation, and social change. We have to start thinking about how we can communicate that. When we talk about volunteer resource management, the most important thing is that in the back of our minds, basic to everything, is that this is a profession. And we have to be convinced that this is a profession and I'm a professional while I'm doing the job, in order to be able to advocate effectively for volunteer management as a profession. Does that make sense? I hope so. Yeah. So the next slide is where to start. And it starts right there, just like I said. It starts with your own mindset, being convinced I am a professional. And I'm gonna sort of segue for a second into my own personal experience. I just was working with an organization, and I was working with somebody who was a new volunteer coordinator in this organization. And one of the big challenges was, this was a young person with very little experience in volunteer management. And in fact, they were not convinced quite yet that volunteer management is a profession. If you're not, and I could see that they were already having a problem in convincing others that they should have respect from other staff when they themselves were not convinced that this was a profession. If you're not there, that's fine, but you might not be in the right position. If you feel that this is important, then you have to have that philosophy and that conviction that this is a profession and you're a professional. The other part about where to start is, again, having your own strategic advocacy process. Know how you think about advocacy and how you're going to work through that process, including that monitoring and tweaking it to make it work in the end. But you need to have your own strategic process, maybe even write it down if that will help. It's really important. Another place to start is if you check out Mava's study, and I've put the I've put the Mava Network URL here, and you can go there. This again is called the oh, help me out here. It's different on the well, first of all, Gretchen, is the study anywhere on our website?
I think it's in the news announcements.
Okay.
But let me make a note to put that maybe on the resources page.
That would be great. It's called Promoting Job Equity Initiative. So if you go to the mavanetwork.org and look for Promoting Job Equity Initiative, then you can read the report. On pages 24 and 25, and I will see if I can get permission to send this out, there is something called the personal checklist, personal plan and action checklist. And that goes through just sort of a checklist on things that you can start doing on an individual level, on a local level, on an organizational level, and on a national level to help promote the profession. So this is a great, very tangible place to start, advocating for yourself and for the profession. So those are some of my ideas. What are you going to do?
Emily, I've got a great comment here from Nikki.
Great.
She says, I think certification is an important step. It really does lend weight to what you say and you advocate within your organization. Suddenly, the things you say are not just your isolated opinion, but represent the best practices of the profession.
That's a great idea. I wish we had another poll here. I would love to see how many people are certified, one way or the other, whether it's a CVA or if it's Mava's certification process. That would be a great idea. If you can, sort of chime in the chat box and say certified, that would be great, just to get an idea of how many of you are certified, or how many of you want to be certified and are looking for information about that. What else are people doing to advocate for the profession? I see you are a CVA, Gretchen, since the turn of the century. Anybody else? Well, let's move on to just sort of a summary on the next slide.
Got it?
And Nikki, since you brought up certification, advocacy is a competency of the professional volunteer manager, according to CCVA. And so, yes, certification, whether it's CVA or another way of certifying, is a great way of supporting and advocating for the profession and advocating for yourself. Advocacy is intentional, whatever whatever you, however you use it, whether it's Pi or some other model, just remember that it's intentional. It's about communication and collaboration, requires those knowledge, skills, and practice, a lot of practice. And advocate and volunteer managers advocate on behalf of and for volunteers, volunteer involvement, and for the profession, sometimes all at the same time. So we're going to open it up for questions, but before we do, we have a few live announcements. I want to make sure we get those in before some of you have to drop off. So we will have a chance to go back and talk, but right now, Gretchen.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. There's just a few other comments too that I'll just tack on quickly. And Angela, maybe this would be a good discussion on how you did this. This is a great way, I think, just what you've been talking about to give that legitimacy. As she said, when her job description came up for review, she encouraged them to add CDA a plus in the requirements, and they did.
Fantastic. Congratulations. That's a great idea.
And yeah, so I'll go quickly here to the announcements and give a moment for that slide to pop up. So just invite everybody to check out our newsletter and calendar on our website. Our recent newsletter came out, and as you all are Alive members, you likely got it. If you didn't, you can find it on the resources page under newsletters. There is a program in the works to set up an official mentoring program, and we've got a couple of board members on the call today who are actively involved in getting that going. So should be hearing more about that within the next few weeks, or definitely by the next newsletter, I'm thinking. Always an opportunity for people to get involved, the committees and presenters, and again, more information in our next newsletter. But if you want to know more, you're always welcome to just send me an email at manager@volunteeralive.org, and I'm happy to send it to the right person. And I'll put that also in the question box there so you can see it. And the registration is now open for Leading the Way, Not Managing the Day, which is our hybrid conference where we live stream our wonderful presenters direct to your local association or organization. And we do have a couple of people here who have participated in the past. And we do have one person, Angela Williamson, who is going to be one of the presenters. And she's going to give a terrific presentation about really practical nuts and bolts stuff about how to develop those leadership skills for yourself, for your volunteers, and, for your career goals. And I invite you to check that out. Again, you can find information on that about our website, but we've got some wonderful videos from the presenters and our host and moderator, Dana Litwin, on what that will be like, and you can find that on our website. And as always, follow us on social media. And I will say, if I can add one more announcement in there, if I may, Emily, and you talked a little bit about that, the summit and the outcome of that of forming the alliance. And you could find information about that on our website as well as far as those next steps. One of the things that I've been contracted to do is to be gathering professionals to discuss this academic research for academic piece. And I'm there as the facilitator to, herd the cats, if you will, to set up the meetings, to take the notes. But you should be hearing more about that in your something in your inbox, either through the Alliance or through Alive or through other networks. But if you are not a part of that in any way, if you want to be, again, feel free to email me, and I will make sure to put you on that mailing list.
I'm sorry, regarding that, I am on that particular research committee, along with a couple of other people right now on the Pracademics research part of it. So if you would like some further information about that and some of the people that we will be working with, you can also contact me. My email is on the next slide. I also want to mention real quick that the website is like the place to go for all of this information. not only will you see the newsletter and the calendar about all the trainings that are going on, but you will also hear the news about the mentoring program. And then there is also a tab where you can go and see where you can get involved. That's the name of the tab. And that will lead you to some very important information about what it means to be a presenter, what it means to volunteer on a committee, and all of that information. So please use the website, the Volunteer Alive website. It's got a lot of information there. It's your portal to everything that you want to know about what we're doing.
And if there's something you want to know that you'd like to see listed there, let us know as well. Emily, we've got about 10 minutes left for discussion, and I'm just going to read the rest of the comments before we go into this, and maybe back to Kieran's question about bringing along those volunteers who've been there for a long time to help them, adapting to that change and using those. So let's see. So Jerry says, I've once again gotten involved. One of my local professional associations. I started last year in the committee, and this year joined the board. Good for you. Becca says, taking a leadership role in my area volunteer administrator association to enhance programming. That makes me think about that saying about, I always wondered when somebody would do something about that, and then I realized I was somebody. And that may be what you did, right? Good job. Let's see. Karen Patterson says she's not currently certified, but would love more information on the process. And I let her know any of us on the call here would be happy to talk to her more about that. Angela says she's doing a talk at the local Young Professionals board meeting, and I know that Young Professionals Network is definitely a growing organization and a great way opportunity to be connected. She's going to be covering the top 10 ways to be a great volunteer, which I think is fantastic. And Angela, we talked about that, adding the CVA to the job description. And Shelley Kaiser in here has put a link to the model website for that content you've been discussing. Okay. And Jerry says his personal mission is to get professional association board to implement best practices of volunteer management when recruiting, screening, and recognizing board members, volunteers. Yeah, you have to definitely, that's so true. When you are involved in a local association, you're running a volunteer program as well. And the link that Shelley posted in the questions is for the article, Why Job Equity for Volunteer Engagement Professionals Maximizes Overall Impact of Your Nonprofit, and includes a link to the report referenced in this webinar.
Great.
Those were all the comments. So now we've got a little bit more time for discussion.
Great. So, well, let's go back to what Karen was, Karen's comment about bringing along volunteers in the change. Does anybody else have any input? Again, part of professional development is about sharing, not just what you do, but how you might be able to help somebody, meet with the challenge that they're having. So is there anybody who has some ideas on how they can support Karen and the issue that she brought up? Let's see, I'm trying to find out, let's see, what Karen said. So Karen's issue was, what you wrote was, we have many long-term volunteers and our organization is experiencing a lot of growth. I would like to discuss easing volunteers into change and making them feel like a part of the process. Karen, do you have a, can you be unmuted so that you can talk about what you have done? So I'll just while we're trying to unmute Karen, I would just like to say that in my experience, this goes back to that leadership development of your volunteers. That's one of those ways of dealing with that. I've worked with developing and including sort of volunteer-based, all volunteer-based advisory councils to the volunteer programs that you're running, or the volunteer department. Another thing is really about transparent communication, is communicating with your volunteers so that they are, this is more of an easing them into it, so that they know exactly what those changes are, and giving them a voice, a way to discuss, even if it's just among themselves, how this is going to impact them and how they can, there you go, change. Change can be a challenge. Can they be involved in a task force contributing to the solutions and part of the change process? Exactly. Giving, even if it's internal to your program, but then being able to take their voice outside of the program to the rest of the organization might be a way of easing them into it, but also getting the rest of your organization to understand. I hope that's helpful. And anybody else, please go ahead and type in any other ideas. One of the things that I would love to know is if anybody has any ideas of how a local association, or in this case, a national organization like Alive, can better support you in advocating for the profession, or what we can do to better advocate for the profession. Jerry, you talked about, which was really great, about having your local organization, again, walk the talk, using best practices on how they build their local organization. By the way, Alive is really involved in that. We have a whole committee that's focusing on how to help Dovias and local associations start, build, and grow and sustain. That's one way. Anything else? Raise your hand. We want to know. Gretchen, are we hearing anybody? Okay, great thoughts. Thank you so much. No hands are raised. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to be asking as we, are there any other questions that people have, or any other challenges or topics that they want to bring up, even if we don't have time to discuss them right now? About this topic or any topic, but especially about advocacy. So as everybody is sort of, looks like we're rolling off, I do want to say that this is the first time that we've made an hour and a half, and we've tried to make this a much more interactive kind of conversational kind of webinar. I've gotten feedback from several people that this is the kind of webinars that they're really looking for, where we can have these discussions and build networks. Obviously, we have technical difficulties that we have to work on. This is our first time of making this hour and a half and very interactive. But I would love to get feedback, and we'll send out a survey at the end to get ideas on how we can make this work, and if this is something that you're really looking for, where we're talking more and discussing more, and how we can, and if this is better than having a straight 1 hour training kind of webinar. So we have two schools of thought here. I'd love to hear how this works. So please feel free when we send out a survey to answer us or give us some thoughts right now. Great. Enjoy the interactive approach. That's fantastic. One last question, and we can ask this in the quick survey unless you have some comments right now, and that is, when we send out the slide deck tomorrow and the quick survey, is there anything else that you would like us to send out with that? Is there anything that a list of names of people who were here, so that we can start networking, any other kind of handouts, the resources, obviously, the MAVA resources, anything else? Are there things that people would like to have included when we send this out tomorrow? Gretchen, are we hearing anything? No questions, no comments, no ideas of what else you want to hear from us? Like that it is free and an Alive membership benefit. Thank you, whomever included that. That is what Alive Academy is all about. It's about providing these free webinars, these free opportunities to both learn, share, and discuss. So I'm glad that it is appreciated. So if that's the case, we have 1 minute to go. Oh, great, Nikki. I was hoping that that would come through too, that we can send out the comments. I've been taking some notes. We'll incorporate all of this kind of stuff into it. Yes, that's a great idea. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me at this webinar. I hope that it was interesting and beneficial to you all. I'm looking forward to hearing the comments tomorrow and from the survey. And please feel free, if you have any questions, to contact me. My email is right here. Or Gretchen, if there's any comments and questions or things that you want to say about Alive. And please go to our Alive webpage, website. Oh, there, I'd like to keep in touch with others and share ideas. That's great. We will connect with you, whoever said that. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and have a great weekend. Gretchen. Oh, missed call. Huh. Hi, it's me. I saw you called me. I'm wondering if you are if you are still on the webinar. It hasn't closed down yet. So just wondering what's going on. Anyway, bye. For staff. What's going on? I can't see who's in it. Chat. Spam me. There's nobody. I'm gonna go leave. Is she wanna leave it? Yes.